It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm Tim Niederreiter, and I'm alone again this week, but that's okay. It's crunch time on Shadow Prince. I'm editing it. It'll be out very soon. Days away. Just days away from this release. And I am coming to you to talk about writing process a little bit, because this show really is, despite the name, a lot about writing. And, you know, I talk to writers all the time. But this week it's a little bit more about me, so it's a little self-interview thing maybe, but it's really about my recent project and what I'm learning from it. The key here that I'm looking at is kind of economical fiction writing. What do I mean by that? I mean writing fiction in a way that you can sustain, and it's something I'm coming to understand in my own life and my own process, because I started dictating last year. That shook up my process a whole ton, and over the past year I've really been adjusting to that. And it's been almost a whole year. No, it's been just over a year since I released the first novel I dictated, which was Demon the Scroll. And despite some initial editing issues with that book, it's now fixed up. It's nice and spiffy, I think, and I'm really happy with it. Well, the thing is, despite the issues that it had initially, it was one of the fastest books I ever wrote. It was extremely fun to write and easy to edit in some ways. I mean, very difficult to edit in most ways, though, compared to my older books. So editing time and writing time just flipped as far as how much time I spent on each, at least. I mean, there's still less time overall. But when I think about a book, the older books, the books I wrote before I started dictating, they all required like 80% of the time I spent on them was spent writing the book, the rough draft. But now, oh boy, things have changed, because the rough draft now only takes a week or 2 weeks, depending on how long the book is, to dictate. And then it takes another whole bundle of hours. It's like 20 hours to dictate the book, just to give you some raw numbers. I'm not sure if you're interested in this, but I find it pretty interesting. It's 20 hours to dictate a 120,000 word book for me. I dictate pretty quickly. Not everyone's numbers are going to be the same, and don't feel bad about it if they aren't. Anyway, that's about how long it takes to dictate the rough draft. But then editing takes another 40 to 60 hours probably. So that's a lot of work. Oh boy. Yeah, once I've transcribed all that dictation, I'm only about a quarter of the way to the end of the book, or maybe a third. And that is kind of scary. It was scary to realize it at first, and to make the book as clean as one of my older books, because I used to have very clean drafts when I finished the rough draft, because I spent so much time on it. Well, to take a dictation draft and make it as quality as one of those older books is challenging, and it has been challenging for me, but it also has been challenging to commit the time to editing, because it's basically reading and making small tweaks for a lot of that. The first reread draft is really just cleaning up stuff and deciding what makes sense and what doesn't. And I throw a lot out, and I rewrite whole sections on the computer instead of at the voice recorder. But I found it interesting, because I guess when I dictate, I make a book a lot faster, but then I also have to look over it more and more thoroughly. I think these are both good things. But the key here is that I used to build so much energy just writing the rough draft, but it took so long that energy went back or was wasted. It used to get wasted in some ways. The enthusiasm and momentum I spent building up to do doing the writing is just kind of bled away by the time it takes to do all the writing, because when I typed, I was much slower. So, what does this mean? It means that when I edit a book, as my new process looks like I want to do, I want to edit a book, edit the chapters I write, do at least some of the editing the day I write those chapters. And this is kind of counter to what a lot of people say about a lot of writing advice will be, but this is old school writing advice, and I'm fine saying that maybe it's not right for me anymore. I used to follow it, and I still think it's good advice if you are taking months or years to write your book, the rough draft. it's probably to your best idea to give it a little break before you go back and edit it. But when I'm writing, I'm not looking at a page or a screen. I'm looking into the air and imagining what's happening because I'm dictating. I don't have a computer in front of me at that point. And so it's very different to look at it in the computer, and I think that'll give me the kind of distance I need, because it comes out very gross compared to what I kind of want it to right after I dictate. So there's a lot more editing to do, but also I think I could do that the same day. And I can use some of that momentum, that enthusiasm I build up while writing, while dictating that stuff on the edits to make them even more quality. Because I'm a discovery writer, or a pantser as people say, so I don't plan that much. I don't have much of a plan at all when I start books. I mean, I have kind of an idea of where I want the book to go, what the book should be about, and then I just let it take its course with the characters, and I discover them as I go too a lot of the time. Especially the side characters, they just kind of pop up and then they become who they are as I go. And usually that works out for me. Let me put it that way. Usually. I won't necessarily claim every time, but most of the time. And so the key here I'm looking at is using the fuel that I get and trying to use it every day, because it does kind of go away if I don't use it. It just kind of gets wasted. And I'm not saying I'm not trying to complain about my process. What I'm saying here is, consider in your own life, in your own process, if you're a writer, or, I mean, honestly, any creative work you do, and everyone does creative work in some way, I think. It's always better for people if they do, if you ask me. But whatever creative thing you're doing, consider how the parts you get charged up by, the parts you feel excited by, consider how those can fuel the other parts of your creative economy. You know, because not every bit of the work is going to be as much fun as, you know, I mean, I don't know. It used to be for me, creating the rough draft was super fun, or creating the history, the notes was really fun too. And then the project just got less and less fun as it went on. But actually, I'm kind of thinking, I'm trying to take my own kind of joy in everything. And I really, really get that way about the time I was starting to listen to the book out loud, and I'm listening to the computer read me the book in the editing process. That's when I start thinking, oh, this book's pretty good. Because by then, I've cleaned up the rough draft a lot, and by the time I'm done with it, I feel like I've done a really good job, and it feels great. It looks great to me, and I really enjoy that book, and that phase of the editing is actually one of the most enjoyable phases. It also doesn't take that as long as you might think it would take to listen to a whole book, even a big fantasy book. When the computer reads it in its kind of dead robot voice, it's surprisingly entertaining and interesting. And I follow along, and I make the changes that I hear that are errors when I'm listening to it. So that's how I do, that's my kind of my main pass after the initial reread with the big edit. So what am I trying to say here? I'm just going over my process, but I'm also saying that there's ways to consider approaching your own work and your own writing and craft in ways that don't lead to a mental churn and a downward spiral. This is the problem. For me, I've changed a lot lately. I don't know if you've noticed on the podcast. I probably don't seem that different in the recent episodes, but also I haven't really released any recent episodes, interviews, since I started the last couple of weeks of performing a kind of routine activity in the morning, some routine stuff, showering, brush my teeth, getting my coffee. This is kind of the sequence, right? I mean, I had breakfast first, I guess. So breakfast, shower, coffee, start writing. And that process, or editing, actually. It's all been editing because I'm knee-deep in it lately. So when I write, so this process, has led to my writing becoming much more stable, I guess. I put in a lot more time over the past 2 weeks, and past month or so, really, than I thought I ever could. Especially the past 2 weeks have been super, super clean as far as how much time I spent writing and editing. I spend hours and hours a day on it now, and that's perfect on the editing process because I need that much time. It takes a lot of time to do this editing. At least because the rough draft comes out so rough. Very rough draft indeed. Anyway, so I don't know. I just think this is kind of a quick idea for you to remember that taking your mind out of the process, getting a routine going so you don't have to think about every little thing you do, can give you more time not to think about what you're trying to do, but to actually do it. And this is my main point for this episode, is the kind of the economy of writing fiction. That's really the first half of it, but that's just an example of how I'm able to use some principles. The principle of just action. Just acting. Doing the thing you're trying to do. You know what I mean? I don't mean acting in the sense of playing a part or pretending. I mean the part of taking action. You just do the thing that you intended to do, and you don't worry about it. You put away the thoughts, the analysis. You take that stuff out of it, and you just do the thing. And you do it as much as you can, as well as you can. And doing it as well as you can doesn't mean thinking about doing it well. It means just doing it. And that's a really big key. I mean, there's this book called The Inner Game of Tennis. I forget the author's name. That's kind of the book for the week. I mentioned it before on the show. And The Inner Game of Tennis is a terrific book. Just the first third of it has so much information that's not really about tennis. It's about learning skills. And skills that you can learn them with habits better than you can learn them with just your mind. Your brain can't really think its way to having a skill. You know what I mean? I think this is true. I'm pretty certain of it, in fact. That if you just constantly consider how you're going to do something and you don't do it, you're not going to get better at it. And everyone starts out bad at skills. That's the key thing. I mean, Ira Glass has his great little audio essay that I remember listening to years ago about, the difference between taste and skill and why you start with taste and then your skill gradually catches up with it as you do your work. It's very true. And I think one of the key things here is to avoid boredom in working on your skill. So you try to, and honestly, doing small tasks and worrying about them every time you do them. I mean, I'm very guilty of this. I've done this a lot. Like, I'd worry about doing the dishes, worry about how I'm going to shower or brush my teeth. These are the key things that bothered me over the years. I mean, I do have major depression and some anxiety problems, but they're easier to deal with when you take some of those problems and you just kind of compact them into solved problems. And you just do the same thing you did last time. But that it leaves you more time to do creative stuff or more important things, really. More powerful activities, more professional activities, anything you can think of that's important. It's probably worth doing enough to develop it as a skill and leave the other stuff up to habit. Leave the other stuff up to your autopilot almost. I'm not sure if that part makes sense. That's kind of a jump off where I was going, because the key here is that you'll have more energy for the stuff you need to do. If you just take the littlest thing, kind of set it on the side and say, well, we'll just do this in a kind of a perfunctory way, but you'll do it as well as you can still. But you just get used to doing it at the same time in the same way, and boom, now you have more energy, more mental focus to spend on something that demands more focus. So that's where I'm at right now. I think it's important to also acknowledge physical limitations. You don't want to take energy from part of your life that's vital. It's going to keep you alive, either in a literal or figurative way, and try to send that to your writing or your craft or whatever art you're doing. Because if you do that, you could lose your life and you can't do art if you're dead. Sorry to put it bluntly, you can't do more art. You'll never get your project done if you're not healthy doing it. That's how I try to think of it. It might not always be true. You could get some stuff done in an unhealthy way. But do you really want to pay that price? I don't think so. I don't want to. So depending on your priorities, of course. But I really would rather, and I think it makes more sense, to try to sustain how you approach your creative craft, whatever it is. And I like writing a lot. Actually, I've never liked writing more than I like it right now, which is pretty fascinating. I mean, writing and editing have both become something I'm excited to think about and do. But I also don't think you should think too much. That's one of the key parts of this whole process. Don't think too much. Do the thing. Thanks for listening, everybody, and talk to you next week.
That tears it.